Good morning, Hank. It's Tuesday.
You just got said hello to by over 250 TV fighters from around the country. Oh, and also by a U.S. Senator. So last week, with many people in our community, I visited Washington, D.C., and we had over 210 meetings with senators, congresspeople, and their offices to make the case for better funding for tuberculosis and other diseases of injustice, and also gestures broadly. Now, Hank, I have been traveling nonstop since Everything is Tuberculosis came out, and will continue to do so. Today I go to Maine, tomorrow I go to London, and then I fly from London to Peru, the classic reverse Paddington. But being in DC was a real highlight for me because I was in community and making the case for something that matters a great deal to me. And while there, I got to meet and have a conversation with Senator Adam Schiff about our democracy and foreign aid and how the two intersect. Also, we talked about the title of The Fault in Our Stars, so I wanted to share that conversation with you. I wanted to start by asking you a question I know is important to you, which is, where is the line between the president's power, the executive branch's power, and the legislative branch's power? And are we honoring that line right now?
So the Constitution makes that line pretty clear, and it gives Congress the power of the purse. That's our most vehement, strong, ironclad power. He's got the military, he's got authority to run the agencies, but he can't do any of that unless we appropriate the money. But here's the thing, that power, like every other in the Constitution, is only as good as our willingness to enforce it. The day we decide that, well, we're going to let him ignore Congress's appropriation of funds, that is, when we appropriate money and say we want it used thus and so, or we allow the president to take money we appropriated one thing and use it for another, the day we either say that's okay or we say we're not going to stand up to that, then we've given up our most important power. And right now, that is sadly where we are. They are, in the administration, violating the law. It's illegal to try to shut down agencies that Congress has established. It's illegal to use money for purposes other than what Congress has appropriated for. It's also unlawful not to spend the resources Congress has appropriated for things like fighting disease around the world and fighting disease here at home. But that's what they're doing.
So how, I guess, is my big question. How is this happening? I understand that the administration moves fast and courts move slow. And yet today, the Supreme Court, as we're having this conversation, the Supreme Court said that it's legal for the president to fire 16,000 federal workers. None of the cases that are really about appropriations, I guess, have fully made it to the Supreme Court. But how is this happening, and what is or can be done to stop it?
Well, there are two reasons why it's happening. You're right to say the courts move slowly. That actually isn't the problem here. The lower courts have moved pretty expeditiously. They have a lot to deal with, so there's that, sort of flooding the zone, the Steve Bannon flooding the zone with stuff that has to be litigated. The problem now is that we have a right-wing Supreme Court that has adopted what had been a fringe theory of a unitary executive that essentially controls everything. And in the Chief Justice's opinion in that immunity case where the court said basically a president can commit crimes while in office and be immune, the court also gave broad spectrum to the president's powers over a whole lot of other things. So the ability to fire independent commissioners, the ability to fire inspector generals, the ability to fire mass amounts of federal employees. There is now language that's strongly suggestive in that court opinion that the Supreme Court may let him do all that. But the bigger, frankly, more immediate problem than even the Supreme Court is the fact that Congress could stop this, and Congress hasn't been willing to do it. And that's because the majority party in Congress is the same as the president's party. And something that the founders tried to guard against has come to reality, and that is the founders separated these branches and our powers to set ambition against ambition. The expectation was that each house would zealously guard its own institution.
Most people do not willingly give up power, in my experience, just from my study of history. It's very strange, in fact, to see large sections of Congress willingly give up its power. And I wonder if you have an explanation for that, or if you have an understanding of it.
Well, that's exactly what's happening, and you're right. Historically, you might share the same party as the president, but when the president started to trample on the congressional prerogative, that's when you became a senator or a House member, when you were to stand up to the president and say, hey, your power only goes so far. But here, I think that has broken down, and it has broken down significantly because of one thing the president is very good at, and that is he has been very successful at punishing people in his own party who step an inch out of line. And he has a tool now that other presidents really didn't have, and that tool is social media, to marshal an online army of supporters to really go after anyone who steps out of line and drum up a primary challenge to them. And that has really cowed a lot of the members of his party in Congress.
So you think a lot of the fear is about a primary challenge?
Yes.
From the right? You know, somebody who will, do you feel like that's also the case in the Democratic Party? That, you know, there are bigger fears of, I mean, you're from California, you represent more Republicans actually than the vast majority of Republican states, Republican senators do, but nonetheless, like, you're in a pretty safely Democratic state, you probably have more threat from a primary challenge than you have from in a general election challenge. Do you see that as a broader problem for both parties, or do you think it's specific to one party?
You know, it's certainly a challenge, I think, in both parties, where you've seen really a marginalization of the kind of moderate middle. You've seen compromise become a really dirty word.
Yeah.
But the problem is really far more significant in the Republican Party, at least at this moment in time, because you have a president willing to enforce the orthodoxy of the right wing of his party. So you have the president willing to do it, he has the tools to do it, he's been very effective at it, so there's much greater discipline. The Democratic Party, you know, was it Will Rogers who said that I'm not a member of an organized political party, I'm a Democrat? We don't have that kind of top-down hierarchical structure. There's a lot less discipline. That is a strength of our party. We're very diverse in opinion like everything else, but it can be a weakness in terms of sometimes having the cohesion needed to fight back.
I want to ask you, I want to get back to USAID and the importance of global health funding, but I do want to ask you one more question about democracy and the future of our democracy, which is whether you are broadly optimistic. Like right now, most of the people I talk to are really scared. They're really freaked out. They're really overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed in multiple directions. It feels like there's that social media fire hose coming at them. They don't even really know how to respond, a lot of them. And frankly, I think a lot of them are frustrated with Congress, frustrated with the Democrats in Congress, as well as the Republicans in Congress. And you know, as you know, congressional approval ratings are never high. I think Mark Twain said that there's no Native American criminal class except for Congress. Probably shouldn't make that joke to a senator. But I wonder if, broadly speaking, you're optimistic about the future of American democracy, or if, you know, you share that deep concern that we may have crossed a Rubicon.
I would say that I am broadly optimistic. We'll get through this. I don't want to be Pollyannish about the struggle we're facing right now, because frankly we're at a point I never would have imagined this country, where you have institutions being broken down, you have countless lawless acts, you have the press being splintered and intimidated and censored and self-censoring. The Washington Post changing their editorial policy, the LA Times withholding their editorials, press being kicked out of White House events because they won't use the president's crazy lexicon about the Gulf of America. You have universities being picked off, others that are cutting deals with the administration, unwilling to champion academic freedom. You have law firms beating a path to the White House to pay tens, hundreds of millions in fines and to agree to take on the president's pet causes. This is really unimaginable just a decade ago. And it's all happening, and we're still in, what, month 3 of this.
Right.
So there's no understating the seriousness of what we're facing right now. But I also take the long view of this. We went through a bitterly divided time during Vietnam, which was not unaccompanied by violence in the streets and bombings. We have been through a civil war, which is a cataclysm of an order of magnitude far greater than anything we're experiencing today. We've been through world wars. We've been through a Cold War. We've been through a 100-year pandemic, and we will survive this too. But there's lasting damage being done right now. It's going to take us time to come back from this and rebuild, but I have every confidence that one day we're going to look back on this. We're going to ask ourselves, how in the hell did that guy ever become president of the United States? What on earth were they thinking? The only question is how quickly we can get there and how much damage we suffer along the way, but I'm an optimist. It would be tough to do this job if I wasn't. But also, I find lots of reasons to be optimistic in people I meet all over the state of California, all over the country. I was in an airport recently. I have a lot of my most interesting interactions in airports.
Sure.
Something about airports where people know they're never going to see you again. They'll tell you exactly what they think. And I had someone come up. He introduced himself as a Marine. He asked me a similar question. Are we ever going to get through this? Will we ever learn how to talk to each other again? And we talked for quite a while, and I expressed the same optimism. And as he was leaving, he said, I didn't expect you to be so nice.
Right.
Which I took to mean he probably wasn't coming from the same place as I was politically, but I have those kind of encounters all the time with people who view things differently.
Yeah.
But who basically want to get back to a civil life in this country.
But there are so many pressures pushing us away from that civil life. And I think social media is a huge one. I think the sort of network news, the fracturing of our news landscape is part of it. There are so many big forces whose very architecture, I worry, is pushing us away from that civility. And I don't know how to, as somebody who does this for a living, I don't know how to combat that. I try. I think our community, Jackson can speak for our community, I think it's a pretty good community, but it's rare. It's rare. There's so much incivility online, radical incivility, including, made the mistake of briefly going on Twitter today and seeing some of the things that Elon Musk was saying, which, nobody should say those slurs.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Well, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of those.
I know you have. I know you have.
Him. No, I think you put your finger on the biggest challenge we face, the most cross-cutting challenge, and that's simply where we get our information. I'm old enough to have rushed back to my college dorm to watch Walter Cronkite's last broadcast, and that was a time when there was a large body of agreed upon fact, and we might differ with what to do with those facts, but at least we agreed there were facts. Now people tune into the news they want to hear. They have algorithms curate what they want to see for them. We're not exposed to contrary views as much as we used to be, and when we are, it's in the most obnoxious and often vile form.
Right.
I think what you're doing is extraordinarily important because your viewers are people of broad interest and broad political views, and this is a place where they can actually get together and hear different contrary views from people and do so in a civil way.
So that brings me, the only thing that our viewers agree about is that they really hate tuberculosis and also other diseases of injustice.
You can find tuberculosis in just about everything.
It's true.
What you say?
I would agree with you wholeheartedly.
Somebody should write a book about
Somebody
that.
should say everything is tuberculosis. Thank you for the book promo. It is true, though. Tuberculosis is such a big part of American history. My great uncle died of TB. It was causing 1 in 7 deaths just 100 years ago or 110 years ago. And we could go back to that world. We could easily go back to that world, especially with hundreds of thousands of people seeing their treatment interrupted. That'll lead to skyrocketing rates of drug-resistant tuberculosis, which is truly terrifying, not just in poor communities, but everywhere where there are people who breathe. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit to why you think that supporting organizations like USAID and the Global Fund is an important part of the American mission.
Well, I've had a chance to see the work of USAID around the world and the incredibly passionate, determined, and often brave people that are working for USAID in every corner of the world. I remember talking with a USAID worker in Afghanistan during the war, and he was operating in villages without a safety net. He wasn't on a military base all the time, and he was a young man. I think he was in his early 20s. It was a 1-year assignment, and he'd been there, I think, for 3 months. And he told me he had just signed up to do a second year. And I said, wow, you like it that much that you're ready after 3 months to sign up for year number 2? And he said, no, it's not that so much as, I'm in the development business, and you really can't see the product of your work in a single year, and I want to see the results of my work. This is the kind of dedicated people working for USAID, and they're doing development work, they're fighting disease, they're building sanitary water systems. I mean, they're doing great things around the world, and they're incredible diplomats. When someone is helping you get the food and the medicine and the care you need, you never forget them, and you never forget what their country did for you. And so this is among the most effective diplomacy we have. It's an unmitigated good, and to see it constantly disparaged as a waste and mocked is just so destructive. And having gotten to know a lot of these USAID personnel, the idea that they get an email halfway around the world saying basically your services no longer need to come home, or they work here at home and they've been devoted to this, they've gotten to know people they've served around the world and then had the rug pulled out from under them. It's heartbreaking.
Well, I think the most recent estimate is that in the next 2 years, if funding isn't restored, we're going to lose, instead of 1.25 million people to tuberculosis, it is the world's deadliest infectious disease, we'll lose 2 million. So we'll see that go up by 750,000, and we'll see it continue to go up. We'll see more complicated cases of drug resistance, which are much more likely to be fatal. And it's not just, to me, that the funding was stopped. It's the chaotic manner in which it was stopped. It was the total freezing of it very suddenly, without any warning, without any opportunity for countries with their own health departments to be able to try to fill some of these gaps. Instead, the gaps just led to massive discontinuation of treatment, not just for tuberculosis, but also for HIV, for other diseases of injustice. And that's, I do think it's very hard to walk that back. I think it's hard to regain the trust of the people who've been abandoned by the United States government and who inevitably will feel that. Just as you're right, it takes a long time to see the benefits of development. In this case, it's not going to take very long to see the harm caused by walking away from those commitments. I wonder if you have any optimism about our ability to walk back some of these funding cuts.
Well, some of the harms are going to be long-lasting. I mean, as you point out, someone who gets tuberculosis a month from now that might not have gotten it but for our absence, they're always going to have gone through tuberculosis, and that's an injury that cannot be undone. It can be treated, but it cannot be undone. And the damage that we're doing also to our relationships around the world, that can't be completely undone. It will always be a question mark around the world, even when we are back and fully operating USAID again, as I have every confidence we will. It will always be a question mark. Okay, they are now, but are we only one presidential election away from losing that support again? And if we can't rely on the Americans, then who should we rely on? And there are some others that are willing to step into the void.
Yeah, there's an obvious country that's willing to step into the void.
There is, and the thing of it is, it ain't just about altruism for some of our competitors out there. It is, we're going to get our foothold in through development assistance or health assistance, etc., but we're going to want payback for it.
Well, I would add that it isn't always about altruism with the United States either when it comes to aid.
That is true too.
But yeah, I think this is a really important thing for people to understand, that the harm lasts even if we do restore U.S. aid. And so I appreciate you acknowledging that.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because one of the things that I was thinking about, I'm going to do another book promo here.
Oh, great.
The title, The Fault in Our Stars.
Yeah.
I have a sense of what that title is about, but I'm curious about it because I think there's an application to what we're talking about here. My sense is that title was chosen because, at least in part, when you're the subject of illness, it's not your fault.
It's not your fault.
The Shakespearean reference actually runs the contrary way.
Right, so the Shakespeare reference is, the fault is not in our stars, dear Brutus, the fault is in ourselves.
Exactly.
But of course there is much fault in our stars. There's much bad luck, there's structural injustice, There's all kinds of things that lead to faults in the stars. And so this was an attempt to sort of write against that Shakespeare line.
Well, exactly, but here, when we're talking about TB and USAID, the fault is so much in ourselves.
It is.
For somebody who gets TB, the fault is not theirs. But given that we could eradicate this, given we have eradicated it in places, if we don't, this is all on us. There's no punting this off to the stars. This is all on us.
I think that's a great point. I mean, you can no longer, TB has been curable since the 1950s, so we can no longer say that the cause of TB is really Mycobacterium tuberculosis. On some level, the cause is us. In the last 25 years, deaths from TB have dropped by 50%. What's tragic to me is that we're going to walk back 15 years of progress just in the next year. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hank, I'll see you on Friday.